All right, I thought just for fun, it'd be kind of cool to talk about where I learned a lot of this stuff, and maybe it'll help some of you guys maybe know where to go for your own thing or learn. And I was watching Fitzy's Metal Channel. I don't know where he learned this stuff, but funny that a lot of the stuff he learned from the same trades people. I guess maybe we're in the same era. I mean, within 10 years, probably the same era. So there's a lot of things that he does the way I used to do stuff too. Even he still does it the same way because availability of stuff is different in Canada. And I'm not saying I do the same kind of work he does. He was a body man. I was a painter. So those are two different trades, but they're both. Your painter. In order to become a painter, you have to know how to do body work first. There's no way you're going to be able to paint something without doing body work. There's no way you're going to be able to learn it. And back how we used to learn stuff was basically the way that you know I'm teaching you guys is in the garage at home. You couldn't go to a trade school back then. Now they have trade schools, and honestly, I think it's an expensive route, and it doesn't really. I don't think you get enough for your bang for your buck from those trade schools. That's why I started the YouTube channel, so I could teach this stuff another way. So metal fabrication, stuff like that was secondary to, it was just a necessary evil to be able to do the stuff I knew how to do, which is paint. I like to do the most, and that's what I started out doing when I was in high school. So where I learned everything was when I was a freshman or ninth grade. Just some of you guys don't have that. They don't say freshman in England and stuff like that. In ninth grade in high school, they had an opportunity that if you took this multi-class, it was like you could go to wood shop, drafting. There's all these different auto shop, metal shop, welding. I built radios in they had a class on that, I think, in wood. So if I got when I went in the auto shop class, he said, if you get an A in our class, then you can skip the intro class and go your second year of high school, go right into Auto 2, which is actually hands-on working on the cars. So what do you guys think I did? I got an A in that class. So because I wanted to get right into the auto class, and that was my main thing in high school because I knew I was going to get a car and I wanted to learn how to fix it. That was the main thing, and then it just kind of evolved from there. So by the time I had gotten out of high school, I'd already went through 2 periods of automotive every year or three. Maybe some of them I had four. I think I was a TA. So I learned a lot of this stuff in high school. And that's, I learned so much in high school that I actually went to college at Riverside Community College, where they had a body and paint courses there. And I took the auto paint, the intro class there or something. I don't know what it was. I can't remember. But I remember showing up to class in one of these late, and I drove up into class with my Stinger, go right into class, come in late, made a big old noise, come in the door, and everybody's got their heads down, they're taking a test. So the test had everything, basically, all the stuff that, I'd been learning in high school, and they didn't really have it wasn't a body class I had in high school, it was actually automotive general stuff, so it was all kinds of repair and everything else. So by the time I got out of that and I had gotten to college, I'd done a lot of paint jobs on cars and at my house and learned how to do it pretty well. So in that test, they had all these different types of tools, they had different types of dents, they had all these things like this. And I went through the whole test and they were named, what's this tool called? And I was like, oh, that's easy, just shrinking hammer. And, it was like, I just went through the whole test in about 10 minutes. I got done with the test and I looked up and I was looking for everybody else to be. I was like, the guys are all still working on their tests. I'm like, wow, that's weird. So I thought maybe I did something wrong. So I went through the whole test again, another 5 minutes, went through it all. And I go, no, I think I got them all. I think they're all done. So I turned my test in to Roger, the teacher, and handed in my test. And about 10 minutes, and I'm out the shop, when the first one out the shop working. And he comes walking out with my test, and I go, oh boy, what do I do now? And he comes out and he goes, you know a little bit about this stuff, don't you? And I go, well, yeah, I've been doing it through high school and everything else. And he goes, well, he hands me back my test and it's at 96, 98%. I go, what? I missed one? And I look at it and I go, oh man, I just read the question wrong. It was this. And he goes, and so I had basically, I would have had 100%. I just read the question wrong. And he goes, I don't think you need to come to class anymore. I think if you just want to come out and just work on your car, and that's kind of what you joined and came to this for. I go, yeah, pretty much. I just wanted to use a better compressor than what I have at home, and I wanted to do that. So I already basically, he used to just show up and kind of help out, and I'll give you an A. It's no big deal. Plus, the fact was I wasn't a rich guy, so I didn't have a lot of the tools they had there. They had better hammers and different dollies and things that I didn't have, and I was just happy to be able to use some of those nice shop tools. So while that was going on, while I was working at that class, I ended up meeting up with a friend of mine, and they needed a painter at their. They didn't really need one. They didn't even realize they needed one. In fact, they weren't even really looking for anybody. I showed up over to his shop, and he says, "Hey, I was just over at the shop." He goes, "Hey, come by the shop sometime." I go, "Okay, all right, I'll come by tomorrow." He goes, "Okay." He was like kind of bored, and I was a helper at another little guy's shop, and he goes, "Hey." And I go, well, what's this truck here? And he goes, oh, it's here for custom paint. We got to match that rest of the paint job. And I go, well, let's mask it off. And he goes, oh, all right. Really? I'm like, yeah, let's mask it off. We start masking it off, start working on it. I wasn't even on the payroll. And I was just like, hey, we're here. Let's just do something. So I started helping him. And his dad walks over and he kind of sees it and he goes, well, it's about time you guys started doing something around here. And then he came back in a little bit later, and my friend goes, hey, you want to work here? And I go, I could use a job. I just lost my other one because the guy doesn't have any work right now. And he goes, oh, okay. Well, he can't pay you much. And I go, okay, well, it doesn't matter. It's better than nothing. So he goes over and talks to him, and then within, 30 minutes, I'm back. The next day I'm over there working, and I'm on the payroll, and trucks are coming in. So they started bringing in mini trucks, and we started doing paint graphics on them. And I'd never really done that kind of thing, the graphics thing before, but it was just basically mask, sand, paint, matte, all that stuff. So it was basically the same stuff I'd already knew how to do. But started doing custom graphics and stripes and paint blends and whatever, you name it, fake wood, saran wrap coatings where you put on the saran wrap and make it look all wrinkle finish, and you pull it back off, all kinds of stuff we did, take a brush and put on ink, and then you brush it out and then make knots in it and stuff, make it look like wood. Started doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And he'd do one panel, he'd go, okay, here's how you do it, and I'd do the rest of the car. So I learned a lot of stuff there. He would just come over for 10 minutes, and I was the kind of person that if you showed me once, I was going to do it exactly the same. So I learned all that stuff. And meanwhile, I was doing my own body work and paint at my house, side work, because I only worked a couple days a week there, so I need to make more money. So I was doing side work, and that's kind of how it all evolved. And then after that, I went to another company, which was kind of one of the big corporations. It was like it's kind of like the Gerber Collision, or I'm trying to think of the big collision shops. It was in Santa Ana, and basically I was kind of screwing off at the other job, and I was finished my college, and I was like, okay, I want to get do something to make some real money. And so I tried to get a job as a painter several places. I worked at Earl Scheib for a week. I worked at One Day for a day, and those people were the worst slave drivers I've ever seen in one day. So I got out of there and worked at Earl Scheib, enjoyed it, but it was just crap work, So it was just something I did temporarily to get a job because I needed a paycheck, and I was like, hey, they had an opening. Went in there, worked there, and laughed for like several days. I mean, I worked there for a week, and I had more fun than I've ever had painting because nobody cared. It was just totally funny. I was just laughing every day in the booth, so till I had tears in my eyes. It was a blast. But I knew it wasn't going to live long, and I got out of there. Got a job at um, this high tech collision. It was like basically, like I said, Gerber Collision. I'm trying to think of the other one. Anyway, it was all insurance jobs, and some people came in to get complete paint jobs every once in a while or something. There's a couple of crazy people that came in there and had just tons of money and want to do that. So, but what I did there is I was actually, because I was too young. I was like in my early 20s, and they just looked at me and just went, they wouldn't take me seriously. And they said, "Oh, we can't give you a job as a painter, but we'll give you a job as a painter's helper." So I came in there basically as a painter's helper, but every day after lunch, I would be painting everything that was going on. So every day I'd do like 6, 7 spot repairs, have to set them all up, rack them all up, mask them, get them all ready, sand them. They'd be all done. I'd be finished with all my work. And then the rest of the day, I'd be in the second booth spraying out the ones that I prepped. So, and what would happen is I would run us out of work. So as our shop was getting in so many cars, basically I would catch us up really, really fast in about 2 or 3 days. We'd basically run out of work. And I was like the highest paid helper they ever had hired. And so they would call the other collision centers, the other high techs, and they would send me out to different ones. There was like another high tech that had all BMWs, and there was another high tech that did, it was in Garden Grove. Ours was in Santa Ana, was the main store. And there was one in Mission Viejo. And Mission Viejos didn't have a painter, so they'd send me out there, and I'd just blast out like 5 or 6 BMWs. And, I remember they had an interim painter. A guy came in, and he's like, had this BMW. And the other painter who was there had blocked it out. I don't know what he blocked it with. It looked terrible. But this line on the top of the BMW was just wavy, just terribly wavy, really bad. And the painter there is like, "Oh man, we need to fix this one." I grab my DA and start standing. He's like, "Oh, you can't do it with that." And I go, "Oh yeah? Want to make a bet?" He's like, "Oh no, it's not going to pass." I go, "Okay, I'll bet you my paycheck for today it'll pass." He goes, "Really? You'll work for free?" I go, "Yep, I'll work for free if it doesn't pass." So I sanded the whole thing out with a DA, finished it out, primed it, pulled it into the booth, and then he's just like, he's looking at it, and he's like, "It's going to pass." I go, "Yeah, it's going to pass. It's going to pass with flying colors." Repainted the car, pulled it out, done. Well, a couple days later, that painter quit, or he got fired, I don't know. I remember they went through a bunch of painters there, and they wanted to hire me, and I didn't want to do it. It was too far away, and they said, "Oh, can you come be the painter here?" I was like, "No." So I didn't want to go that far out. It was too far from my house to go every day. But I just go there to interim, get caught up and stuff. So anyway, by the time I'd been there about a year, they finally wanted me to be the painter. And at that point, I was done. I didn't want to do that business anymore. I just said, "No, I don't think I want to do this. I don't want to do auto body paint for the rest of my life as a career." And they just looked at me like, "What?" And I'm like, "No, it's not what I want to do." I just realized I don't like dealing with the people and having them come after I busted my ass on something for how many days and have them go, "Hey, can you fix this little spot? I already worked on that for a week. And you want me to fix that little nib right there and I'm going to have to repaint that whole panel?" And it was just, stuff like that just drove me crazy. I was just like, you know what? Do people just disrespect you? They didn't respect the work you did. They would see something and think that you need to fix that and not thinking about how hard you worked to get it to that point. They just look at it, and you know what? Once they got it home, they would never look at that spot again. Never. And but they just had to have that one thing over you. And you know what? I just didn't like that. Well, the cool thing about doing that, and I did side work for many years after, but the cool thing about doing that is I did meet some really amazing bodymen, and that's where I learned a lot of the bodywork stuff that I'm teaching now. I worked with some guys. I mean, these guys they would finish metal finish stuff in seconds. They would just look at it and they would just use the spot welder or stud welder like this. Back the old school ways. Now they have these spot welders you can actually use. Their I forget what they're called, Unispotter or whatever, and they're even better than these. And it, they put all these things on there, and the guy would just like do 2 or 3 little spot welds on it, and he'd have a door ding fixed to metal finish. He used a Vixen file to show all the stuff that I knew back then, even lead finish. But they didn't usually use lead because it's just a pain in the ass. It was always just filler. So 2 of the best bodymen that I ever saw were one of the guys at the shop where I worked at, Chris. I don't know what his last name, whatever. He was the best bodyman. That guy, he could just take the worst wrecked quarter panel. I remember like a wrecked mini truck quarter panel, the left side like this, but didn't have the gas door in it. It was on the Isuzu pickup, and he brought it over and he goes, man, I was gonna, they got to replace the panel on here, replace it. And he goes, dude, he says, I don't really think it, I think I could make it look better by not replacing it. Cause he's like, oh, the seams, when I put it, the seams aren't going to be quite as good if I do it, and if I just straighten this and save this panel, then I can get paid for the extra metal and stuff. And so he would fix it, and it was literally there was like almost no filler in it at all. It was just like totally metal finished, the whole thing. And he was done in about half the amount of time that it would have taken him to replace the whole panel. Yeah, there was a BMW that was like hitting the front bumper, and the whole front end was twisted like this. And it was a 86, it was a less than a year old 88 or something BMW 325, brand new car. And the customer was like, oh, you guys will never make this perfect again. And he had that thing on the frame bench, and he set the front end on, and every panel, when he was done, he put it on the frame bench, welded the thing on, and then checked it, and everything was perfect. Everything was perfect. It just set the front end right on it, and he looked at it. And BMW is a very picky car, and then he just put all the fenders on, and so like when you're a painter, you always go over the body, man. You're like, hey, what do you got? Got anything for you to jam? Any parts for me to do? Or when are you going to have this project ready? We're going to have this one ready, so you kind of know what's going on. So Chris would always show me cool stuff. He'd do like, hey, look at how I did this. And I just pushed out right here and I did that. And I go, wow, you hit it right there. And he goes, yeah, I just hit it right here. And look at that, just pushed out perfect. And, these guys would show you stuff. So I'd watch these guys, I mean, I can't stand over their shoulder and watch them, but you go over the shop and you'd be over there for a few minutes because there's always lulls in your work. With me, when I was young, I was always done. I'd start something, be finished with it, minutes, Mario masked off already. I remember going to one of the other shops and he tried to outbid me on my day rate. And I told the guy I worked with, I'm like, dude, this guy wants to pay me X amount of dollars. And he goes, man, man, he's going to do that to me. I got to pay you more. I can't afford to pay you. I said, no, I don't like working with him. I'd rather work with you. And I just told him that, and because I liked Bob. He was the best painter there was. He was really good. He was fast. He was good. He just drank a lot at lunch, and after lunch, I'd end up painting everything. And, it was just a good guy. He really learned. He did things the same way that I do. The other guy did stuff weird. I mean, he would tell me, hey, sand this with 500. I'm like, it's not going to stick. Oh, no, we use 500 on that. Wet sand it. And I'd be like, fuck, wait, okay, whatever. That's ridiculous, but I'll do it. Do it, whatever you want to do, I'll do it that way. I go, I use 180 on this and take this off and prime it. And he's like, oh, well, I just use 500 on it and then paint it. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So, I learned a lot of stuff from a lot of different guys. And I learned a lot of stuff from good bodymen, that some of the best bodymen that are just like, they knew every shortcut, and let me tell you something. Almost every one of them used the DA to do their body work, and it was perfect. I mean, these guys were doing, Volvo, BMW. I worked at another place that did, all they did was uh, Alfa Romeo. They did all Rolls Royce. Okay, you talk about picky ass people, crazy. If you ever worked on a Rolls Royce, those people are nuts, completely crazy. And a lot of the start work we just have to do everything finished out with block on those. But a lot of it I do with a DA, and then just go back and reprime and just do a final one hand sand, and then get it out of there. I wouldn't do everything by hand. No way. There was just no time and money for it. But it had to be perfect for some of these things. I mean, I had this one painter in another body shop that I worked at, and he would not panel blend anything. He goes, nope, that blending stuff, that's cheating. He was crazy. He was absolutely crazy. I quit. I told him, no, forget it. I'm out of here. You're nuts. I stayed there for like a week because there was a really hot girl that worked in the office, and I was like, until I get her number, I am not quitting. So I'm going to put up with this guy because he's crazy, and I'm prepping these jams in this car, and he's looking at how I'm doing it. And he goes, wow, those turned out really good. You did a really nice job, because he wanted them like perfect. It was a show car Mercedes. And he goes, can you prep these jams? I'm like, how nice. He goes, it's got to be absolutely perfect. This car's going to be a show car Mercedes. And it was like one of those, I don't know, I think it was a Gull Wing, something crazy like that. I forget what it was. But I prepped all the jams on it, and he sprayed them. And then he just looks at them and he goes, oh wow, that's a beautiful job. And how would you mask them from here? I go, oh, I'll do this and this and this. And he goes, okay. And then, but he liked me, but I didn't like him. I just put up with him, but he was weird because he'd do stuff like, he sat there. I remember there was an Alpha or something. I think it was Alpha, one of those high end cars, and it was in the shop for a spot repair, and it was silver, and he's trying to panel match silver. He's gonna panel match it perfect. And he kept doing it. He spray it, being outside, look at it. Oh, I must have did it by 5 or 6 times. And I'm like, dude, why don't you just like steel wool this panel down and you blend it out? Oh, no, 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 not in our shop. We don't do it that way. I'm like, okay, cool. All right. A couple days later, I quit. Well, my favorite materials back then were RM or Glasso Max, not Glasserit. Everybody thinks it's all Glasserit. It was back in the old days. It was Glasso Max. Glasso Max was before Glasserit, and I used to like that base coat that we'd shoot on, and then I would use RM MC 1000 clear coat over it, and it wasn't because the Glasso Max clear was horribly hard to buff, and it just didn't seem to look as good unless you spray finished it, and it was just, I didn't like the stuff. It was horrible. But that was the best stuff they had back then. And it was super, super expensive, and the MC 1000 was, I thought, better and a little cheaper. They're both by BASF coatings, so they were basically like materials. They had back then they had a product called Merocryl, which was a acrylic enamel base coat. It was a brand new thing, and that was the clear that was used over Merocryl, and that was similar to Glassomax, the two-stage urethane, which was a base coat, clear coat urethane system for the early Euro cars back in the 80s. Before that, everything was lacquer, lacquer clear, and you had some urethane clears, and most things were single stage. Acrylic enamel, or back then there was also single stage urethane. They had that as well. But basically, a lot of the prep stuff's been the same. A lot of stuff's evolved over time. Different products have gotten cheaper. Nowadays, back then we used a lot of lacquer primer. Today, everything's urethane, And the reason that is not just because, it's better. It is better, but the reason is because of the new cars have a lot more flexible panels on them. Back in the late 80s, this was kind of a brand new thing. Some of the cars were getting these flexible bumpers, but not very many of them. We had some basic flexible lacquer style primers that we used to use on them to paint them, because there wasn't that many of these type of bumper systems, which everything now is like this. So a lot of the spot repair, we use lacquer primer, or we also use polyester primer, because again, polyester primer is okay for a rigid surface, where lacquer primer would, and also the polyester primer would not shrink as much. The lacquer primer could shrink, and then you'd have mapping around where your bodywork is sometimes. There was ways around that. It just took a little bit extra work. I can't remember exactly what we used to do, but because I haven't done it that way in years. But just like music, to me, I've always stayed up with what's going on. I've never been just caught in a time warp like some guys are in this field. Some guys are just completely stuck in a time warp, still doing stuff exactly the same way back they did years ago. I've evolved into doing things more the way people do stuff today, but I still think some of the stuff today is just way too over the top. Some of the stuff with the metalwork and butt welding, everything, you know, is just like, come on, there's a limit, in saying that, oh, this isn't right unless it's done this way with no filler. And, some of the stuff has just gotten way over the top. There's nothing wrong with filler. You still can build something that lasts. We did tons and tons of cars with it and had them last 20 years more, so, I just looked at that Gia out there. There's filler that was in that panel for whatever, probably 30 years, and it wasn't cracked. So a lot of these things that people want to do today are kind of, they have good intentions why that they're doing them, because they thought, well, the filler cracked on this one, so maybe it'll crack on mine. You got to know why it cracked. Usually it was over paint somewhere. The quality of the filler wasn't very good back in the old days. So if you put it over any kind of paint or drilled holes in it, and did just use slide hammer, but people did a lot back then. Sometimes it would just crack, because it wasn't on there adhering properly. If like in the low part of your dent, if there's little bits of paint in there, and you use the old school type filler, the cheap stuff, it's gonna crack. Just so you know, it's not really about how thick you put it on, really that much. It's about what it's over on those old fillers. Where the new ones they have now, some of them, and some of them aren't. Some of them are more like the old school. You got to read the labels and stuff to know what's going on. They'll, they they'll crack too if you put them over there. If you use the cheaper, $13 a gallon filler, and it's going to be a lot more work to sand that stuff than it is to sand it. Like AG47 is a great happy medium, inexpensive filler, works great. So my experience is not like totally like I did this my whole life. Every day for a living. But like I said, I haven't, I was doing side work, up until the 2000s or something like that. And then I just stopped doing it for like probably, trying to think, almost about 10 years, almost 10 years. It was not quite 10 years where I just didn't really do much of it. I still did my own cars. If my car has a dent in it or has a wreck, I fix it. I don't, my neighbors, something like that, they would know that I did it. And they used to bring stuff over. Hey, I wrecked my car or whatever. I got an insurance check for $4,000. Hey, can you like fix it up? And, that way I can keep a little bit of the money. I'm like, yeah, sure. So they'd get the check from them and I would just do it. It wasn't fraud or anything. It was just, it was their money. They got paid for a complete repair and they would get something not quite the same. And it was their car, so they could do whatever they want with that extra money. So, I put on aftermarket parts, save a little bit of money, pull it back out, use the porter power, frame machine. I even did couple of those, bought a couple cars from the auction that were salvages, fixed them up, sold them. I did a lot of body work and paint, and everything I did was, kosher to an extent. You know, where like if you get a totaled out car, reason it's totaled out is usually because the cost of making it exactly as it was as new is more than the actual value of the car. So if it's not exactly as it's new, but it's safe and it's drivable, then it's a good repair, but it's just not the same. So, insurance companies would just total the car out. So now it's again, I'm not doing this as a business. I don't want to take in any customers. I'm not doing that. Nope, that's not happening. I only do it for my own cars because it's just something I like to do when I set the rules. When I work for somebody else, they think because they're paying, they think they should set the rules, and that's not the way it works with me. So I set the rules of what I'm going to do, what I'm not going to do, and so that's why I only work on my own, and I won't be taking anybody else's car in because I just, again, the reason I got out of this in the beginning was because, hey, see that spot right there? I need that fixed. I'm like, it doesn't look perfect right there. Now I just go push their face in it. It ain't your car, buddy. So anyway, that just kind of gives you guys where I'm at on this stuff and where I came from, and maybe that'll kind of help you understand, what I'm doing. And like I said, I'm just teaching you guys what I know, and I'm teaching, the next gen, a way to do stuff that works, that works good. And there's a lot of people like these fab schools teaching a way to do stuff super perfect, and not everybody has the money for that. Not everybody has the skill set at home for that. This is about doing your car yourself, and learning or watching me. If you don't want to build your car, maybe you just want to watch someone else do it. That's cool too. It's about, if you wanted to learn this or you want to support people learning this stuff this way, that's what this channel is about. And that's what I'm about is just try to get this information out there to people, because someday I'm going to leave this earth. It's going to be over. Everybody will. And, why not let that information get on to the next gen? Why should everything be done through a fab school? I mean, it's not for everybody. What about the people who don't have the money to go through that fab school and they're forced into a career? What if they get into the career and they don't really want to do it? They get it like me. I got in the career, started doing it for a while, and I went, you know what? Screw this. I'm not doing this. I'm not going to put myself through this. And I found another way to make money, that I transferred those skills into painting buildings and signs and refurbishing signs, that people aren't as picky about the stuff, but I still use a lot of the same materials, like ATM surrounds. I paint some of those things. I do some of the cool stuff that you guys see in the real world. And, I don't have to deal with this one guy, that just has to have that spot fixed. He's not going to take the car. I paid you X amount of dollars. In fact, I was talking to one of the guys who does restorations. I'm not going to name his name. Really good guy. And he has a customer that just, he's like, I spent $70,000 on my VW bus. And when you guys put the trim on, there's some micro scratches here, little tiny. I mean, this stuff is just so small. Little tiny micro scratch there, and there's one here. And for God's sakes, you guys should have made this perfect. You know what my message is to that guy? Dude, you paid for labor and materials. Nobody's perfect. That's what you get. That's your labor price and your material price. That's pretty much what he had a conversation with him with. That's how that went. Same guys underneath measuring stuff with a caliper, things that don't even matter. Like, it wasn't like front end angles or stuff like that. He was measuring like, you guys repaired this piece of metal underneath my car, underneath the car, and underneath it this one's a quarter inch taller than that one. And this was like the mounts that are underneath here for that belly pan. There's like, he's like, oh, one side's a little bit different than the other. It's like, dude, That's some seriously ridiculous stuff, you know. And it's like, because this big number was put on this, somebody thinks they're entitled to getting, that kind of stuff done. Where what you paid for is labor and materials. And the labor and materials only go so far. You're not going to get everything perfect for that price. You just aren't. Yeah, there's other places out there that have unlimited budget places. You can take your car there. If the guy was an asshole like that, you can take it to that guy's shop, and there's no budget. You go there, and he charges $100 an hour, $120 an hour, or whatever he charges. I forget what some of these places charge, and they just charge them. And oh yeah, okay, we'll fix those scratches for you. And then what do you want next? Because the bill's gonna keep going up. And this guy's charging him a fixed price, and that's what I told him. I said, dude, you got to really be telling people what they're not going to get, and it's just a shame that somebody would even ask. And he says, that's the first guy I've ever had that ask for this stuff. And I'm like, they're out there, man. That's why I got out of the business. I was like, this is crazy. I'm not going to do this stuff and put myself into this kind of stress for no reason. I'll just do it for fun. So that's what this is about. This is about having fun, building your cars, building something cool, and making it you, and you doing it yourself. Or maybe you're body shop guy, you just want to watch somebody else do it, or you want to rag on them. That's cool. You can do that too. You can rag on me. I'll take it. I don't give a crap. It doesn't matter. I've gotten used to that, so it doesn't care. It doesn't matter at all. But I don't want to, when I see something that I see that it's inappropriate or whatever, if it's not inappropriate, but if it's just unnecessary and it misleads people, sometimes I'll address it in another video, because I just don't want you guys who are really trying to learn to get misled, to learn things, that learn to do extra stuff that you may or may not want to do. So anyway, all right, I'll talk to you guys in the next video. I know it's kind of long, drawn out, but some of you guys probably wonder what this stuff is and why I do this, and that's pretty much why I learned all this stuff in high school. I want to continue. I don't want to take my skills and stuff I learned, throw it all away. I like to do it, but I don't want to do it for someone else. I'd rather just do it for me. Talk to you in the next one. Please like, share, and subscribe.